The following program is made possible by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
5 Democrats are running to replace Jerry Hill representing the Peninsula in the state Senate.
And all 5 are here for a freewheeling conversation about the issues. The Game is Politics. A special edition of The Game is on.
Hi, I'm Kevin Mullen.
And I'm Mark Simon. Welcome to a special edition of The Game.
The 13th Senate District, ranging from Brisbane to Silicon Valley and with nearly 1 million residents, has been ably and energetically represented by Jerry Hill. But term limits are requiring him to move on next year, and 5 Democrats, a field of significant diversity, are running hard to replace him. Today, all 5 are here for an hour-long, wide-ranging, and open-ended discussion of the issues facing one of the wealthiest and tech-centric regions in the state of California.
We are joined by Josh Becker, a public interest entrepreneur from Menlo Park, who also has served on statewide commissions. Michael Brownrigg, Burlingame City Councilman, whose businesses have focused on positive public interests. Sally Lieber, a former state Assemblywoman, former Mountain View City Councilman, who served as Speaker Pro Tem, and who, as you'll notice later on, is playing hurt. Shelly Masur, a Redwood City Councilwoman, who has been CEO of Californians Dedicated to Education Foundation and was a Redwood City School Board member for 10 years. And Oliva, Millbrae City Councilwoman, co-owner of a Peninsula realty firm who has held several leadership positions in local and statewide Realtor associations. Now that I've fumbled through that, welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. We're going to ask you in order the first question, and then after that it's open-ended. We'll start with you, Michael. Why are you running, and why should people vote for you?
Well, thanks, Mark and Kevin, for having us all here and putting this on. I appreciate it. So I'm running because I think the issues that challenge our district and our state are profound. And I think the leadership we need in Sacramento today, right now, is a leadership that can get things done. So the issues I care about are affordability, which I think is crucial for our district, education, which is crucial for our state, and climate, which is crucial for our planet. And I think what we need is somebody who not just talks about issues, but actually has a track record of getting things done. So I'm proud of the record in Burlingame. I've been on council for 10 years. I've been mayor twice. We're going to build a whole new neighborhood in Burlingame, growing our population by 20% over the next 10 years. We've added new schools and parks. We've expanded daycare, all while paying down pension deficits. So I am proud of a record of being fiscally responsible but creative and working with our private sector to get stuff done. And I think that's what we need in Sacramento.
Thank you, Michael Brownrigg. Oliva, you're next.
Thank you. I am a mom, I'm a council member, I'm a small business owner, and I'm a realtor that finds affordable housing for people every day. I understand the astronomical prices that are out there for people to buy a house, and I am sorry to say that it would take an IPO to afford a house in this neighborhood. I think that it's absolutely atrocious that it would take hours to go to and from work each day in our traffic gridlock. And I also believe that if we don't come together, we can't keep this California dream alive, and we need to make room for everybody, and I include affordable housing for all. Politicians often use the word crisis a lot, and I think that what we need to do is look at the crisis that is not just the actual crisis, but the human side of that, and I'll give an example of that. When a mom receives a phone call that their son is on the street because of drug addiction, that is me. I was that mom. And it's a horrible story. My family's gone through it. That is an issue that needs to be addressed, and that is a crisis. Homelessness is a crisis. I know that because I've lived it. Housing is a crisis. I work every day for affordable housing and finding people houses. That is a crisis. Traffic is an environmental crisis, and I'm going to do just that. Treat it like a crisis. We need to come together and stop talking about these issues and doing something about these issues. Words are just not enough. We need to come together and do something, and that is why I'm going to Sacramento.
Okay, I think we're going to talk about all those issues. Thank you. Sally Lieber.
Thanks so much. Well, as you indicated in your introduction, I've worked at several levels of government. At the local level as a city councilwoman and as mayor, where I spearheaded affordable housing and environmental programs for our city. I've worked at the county level, working with dependency care and foster care, some of the toughest issues that we still have to resolve for California. And also at the state level, in the state assembly and as the Speaker Pro Tem of the state assembly. And I served in the assembly for 3 terms, probably at one of the worst times in California history, where we had the largest budget shortfall of any state in the US ever. And I had to do a very deep dive into the functions of state government to try to make things work. After leaving office, I've worked on some of the governance issues that I think are very important to our future in California. So I know how the process works. I have experience at the state level. I've represented 440,000 people in the state assembly, and I think that I can take on the job of representing 980,000 in a very effective, progressive direction. It's really clear to me that for our future, we have to have more funding for education. We have to do a better job of responding to the climate crisis. And we have to work on the housing that's needed for our future and for a diverse California. And that's what I'm looking forward to digging into.
Thank you. Josh Becker.
Well, Jerry Hill's done a great job, but he's termed out. We all have big shoes to fill. I'm running because I think I have something to contribute. 7 years ago, Jerry Brown appointed me to the State Workforce Board. I was a founding trustee of University of California at Merced and served on that board for 15 years. I teach now at College of San Mateo. My kids are in our public schools, and I chaired our school bond. I'm on the board of our education foundation. I'm a county commissioner here for early learning in San Mateo County. So I think of a broad range of experience bringing business, labor, other folks together to get things done. But listen, I don't think there's a bad choice up here for voters, and I hope they pick me.
Josh, thank you. Shelly Masur.
Thanks for having us. So I've become quite fond of this saying, if you want to know where somebody's going to go, take a look at where they've been. So let me tell you quickly where I've been. I've been with the viewers of this station in community, working hard every day, starting out as an organizer in women's health and reproductive rights, putting my body in between protesters who are seeking to close the clinics down and the women who are seeking their health care. That led me to get a master's in public health, and it's why I want to work on access to high quality health care for everyone. I've been a fighter for public education, first as a mom in a low-income school, and then as a Redwood City School Board member, as you mentioned, fighting for public education funding every year, year after year, and it's why I want to work on moving our state from being in the bottom 10 in funding our public schools to the top 10 in funding our public schools. I've been an advocate for a path out of poverty. Working in Redwood City as a council member, I led the effort to raise the minimum wage. We've increased our affordable housing and housing at all levels, and working to increase access to affordable childcare. All issues that the state has a role in playing. And then finally, of course, the climate crisis, which people have mentioned. The state's been a leader. We need to do more, as the governor said. We've put all the pieces in place, and now we just need to implement it to make sure that California leads the way in this country. So that's where I've been, and that's where I want to go, and I hope your viewers will want to go there with me.
All right, thank you all very much. We're going to start the first question with the topic that seems to be, if people aren't talking about traffic, they're talking about housing, or they're talking about housing, they're talking about traffic. So let's start by talking about housing. We have maybe the lowest unemployment rate in San Mateo County and perhaps in the Senate District of anywhere in the country. So there are jobs that go empty all the time because simply there aren't enough people to hire. On the other hand, we have phenomenal growth in population, phenomenal economic growth, and not enough housing for everybody. So you're in the legislature. One of the things that's going to come up is State Senator Wiener's attempt to require local government in some way or another to do something about the housing crisis. He has tried to impose a bill that would require them to build around transit hubs, require them to build high density, high level buildings. Where's your position on that particular proposal? And if not that one, then what?
So I'll start,
Shelly.
because actually Senator Wiener's endorsed me, and so people always want to know, where do I sit on his bill? So he and I have had a conversation about this, and this is what, as an advocate with my local council members this past year, as we went up to the legislature, we talked about. Give cities an opportunity to do their own plan, focusing their housing around transit, reflecting the wishes of their community, and give them a limited amount of time. The legislature and the governor have put money in the budget so that cities have money to do that planning. They can do it, give them that time, and then if they don't do it within that time, then the provisions of the bill, SB 50, would kick in. There's one other change I would have made, which is in the negotiations, the counties with a population of 600,000 or less were exempted. If we're going to meet the governor's new goal of 3.5 million new homes, we can't put it all on 15 counties, and that's what that exemption would have done.
So you like the idea of essentially coercing local government into doing something either with
Well, that's not really what I said, but I'll let my colleagues respond, but that's not what I said.
Oliva.
I think the incentive is a great idea. Yet when I look to my city like Millbrae, it needs to be sustainable. So if we're going to put the housing in, I think Millbrae did a wonderful job in saying, okay, we have a beautiful transit development opportunity. Let's do it. Let's put a housing because we need housing, but yet we need to be able to sustain that. And that requires putting mixed use with commercial, and we are able to put a hotel there so that our city can remain
Yeah, but most
customized.
cities don't have a site the size of the
Right,
BART
and
area,
so there should not be a one-size-fits-all to all cities. In fact, the one-size-fits-all wasn't one-size-fits-all. Marin was excluded from this whole plan.
And I actually think a lot of city governments get this. I think we're getting ahead of Sacramento. We're already starting to build. Look at what's happened in downtown Redwood City. Look what's happening in Burlingame and San Mateo and Mountain View. In fact, SB 50 won't work because the only part that it rezones is single-family housing near transit. Where we need to do is give cities the liberty to rezone their commercial districts or their industrial districts the way we're doing, and let cities figure this out. The one, I agree with Shelly.
When you say we, you're referring to Burlingame.
I'm saying that's the way cities should be able to manage in a way that satisfies real housing demand. And I agree with Shelly, work with the cities, but the caveat I would add to that is make sure we have a private sector auditing the plans, because most of this land is privately held. That's what people continually forget. And if you can't make it work for the private sector, nothing will get built. I don't think SB 50 would yield a single new unit.
Yeah.
Sally Lieber.
I think we have to look at the fact that there are 29 transit agencies in the Bay Area, and exactly one has been authorized to have housing on their surface parking lots or surplus lands. We have to open that up and have more of a discussion there. And we do need accountability for the cities. When I was in the state assembly, I carried legislation that's now the law that says that the local cities have to include in their general plans what they're doing in terms of extremely low income housing, a category of housing that's become even more important. But we have to have housing at every different level. And I think that SB 50 and the local control issue has kind of sucked some of the oxygen out of the room. And we need to look at the full scope of housing. And there has been a lot of good progress this year in saying that the local cities can determine what forms of rent control they would like to have, and in putting some precautions into place to allow people of modest means to keep the housing that they have in rapidly gentrifying areas like ours. And I think it's very important to look at the overcrowding in the housing that we have and the impact that that has on families and children in our schools.
Well, what does it mean to look at it?
Well,
before you answer that, because we're running out of time in our first segment, we haven't heard from Josh yet. But when you say look at it, I don't know what that means.
Well, I think if you look at is the family housed or are they not housed? We need to mix in indicators like overcrowding, 4 families in one apartment. Yes, all 4 of those families are housed, but are they housed in a way that is adequate for their family life and for their children's lives. And we have to have more housing that's in the missing middle for families in our community. About half of this district are in the upper quintile in terms of income. And then we have a lot of folks who are in the bottom quintiles. And we need to look at their needs and moving them forward.
We're going to have to take a break. We'll come back to this topic at the beginning of the next segment. You're watching a special edition of The Game with the five Democratic candidates for the state Senate. Stay with us.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to a special edition of The Game. We're interviewing the five Democratic candidates for the state Senate, the 13th state Senate district. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen. And we're not going to introduce these people again. Their names will show up on the screen. We were talking about housing, Josh, and we hadn't gotten to you yet.
Sure, we need to do more on housing. I'd like to tackle the demand side for a moment. We're in a boat that's leaking. So we've approved way too many jobs for the housing that we've approved. So these well-paid workers are pricing out our teachers, our union workers, our nurses. And if we don't plug that leak, it threatens to drown out our middle class. And so what I've said is, if you're a company, a large company, over 1,000 employees, for every new job you create, you should have to fund a unit of housing nearby. So that's not going to solve the problem we have, but it's going to keep the problem from getting worse. I also want to thank you, Kevin, for the work you've done on rental assistance. I think we've seen it's much more humane and cost-effective to keep people in their homes rather than to house them once they've lost their house. So rental assistance, I think, is an important part of keeping people in their homes.
So you're talking about taxing employers every time they add a job?
Well, I think Mountain View, for example, has led with a head tax, which I'm very supportive of. It's a small one. If you look at San Francisco or San Jose, San Francisco has a payroll tax. Every employee, it's about $2,000. Our communities grew up as bedroom communities, so we never had those taxes because people would just commute up to jobs in San Francisco. Now the jobs are here and we don't have any of those taxes. So Mountain View led with a very small one, about $100 per employee. That raises about $5 million. It's really a drop in the bucket for Google, a drop in the bucket for Google what it's aimed at. But all that money, everything from that tax is going directly to transportation. So I think, yes, a tax that would go to housing or transportation in those cities, I think would be valuable.
That is
Actually, we actually do have that in Redwood City as well. And I think the issue is when you do that, how do you spend the money and where do you put it? And the challenge I think we have as cities, and Michael alluded to this a few minutes ago, is we don't necessarily have the land to build the housing. And so we do have to work with private developers to get them into our cities, to zone appropriately so that they can build. In Redwood City, when we did our downtown precise plan, which anybody who's been to downtown Redwood City has seen the result of it, and my predecessors put it in place, it also, in addition to zoning, it went through the CEQA process so that when a developer came in, if they met all of the goals of the precise plan, they could build. They didn't have to take an extra year or two to go through the CEQA process. They could just come in and build. And that's why you saw 2,500 units of new housing in downtown Redwood City in the span of 5 years.
Doesn't that run the risk of killing the golden goose? I mean, you've got companies who say, I'll go move somewhere where they're not doing this to me.
Well, and I guess I wonder a little how much, if you ask every job to support a housing unit, how much is that per job? It sounds like a lot more than $100.
Well, if
that's one more tax,
$600,000 for building a new unit on average, right? So if you're talking about that, that's a significant amount per employee, and most employees are not going to be making that much.
That's one more regulation, one more tax for a state that wants to be business friendly. So I would not support that idea, Josh. I think that there's the supply and demand absolutely is the important part to go. We need to build more housing, but we need to talk about transportation if we're going to talk about that.
And we will talk about transportation. Just one final question, though. The governor's talked about creating 3.5 million new units on his tenure. We are nowhere near that kind of a trajectory. So there have to be big, bold structural changes to the way housing gets built in the state of California. So are any of you for supporting CEQA reform or restoring redevelopment so we have an actual funding stream to build these units? What are some of the other tools that the state can employ to help these locals build these millions of units that are needed if you want to match the job growth that's projected? Mike,
I want to endorse Shelly's point, which is global CEQA plans help smooth things out and cut red tape for developers. And I do think CEQA could be made simpler, always focused on the environmental issues, but tightening it up. It takes an awful long time to go through those project by project, so I would be a champion for that.
CEQA should be used for environmental purposes, not to slow down any development. And so if we could reform that to make sure that what Michael and Shelly both said, if the process can go smoother and it was focused on what it was created for, then it would work much easier.
So they talk CEQA.
Yes.
CEQA as a possibility. Where are you on that, Josh?
Yeah, I think we absolutely have to look at streamlining it. So there have been abuses of CEQA, clearly. So I think we do have to look at reforming it. But also what you said is the funding side of affordable housing. We need a massive infusion of capital. When we lost redevelopment, that was a tremendous loss. I believe restoring it, I think we can fix some of the excesses of redevelopment. But we need to match it with local funds. SB 5 that just passed, I think will be an important piece of that. In Measure K here in San Mateo County, the supervisor supported Measure A in Santa Clara County that I supported. So I think we're getting there, but it still doesn't quite match where we were with redevelopment.
Yeah, and CEQA reform has become such a buzzword, and most of the folks who are proponents of it don't really know what the elements of that would be. But CEQA is basically there as a protection for the public to ensure that projects are fully vetted and that the community has a say in things. And to the extent that there are abuses of CEQA by over-eager environmentalists or whatever is being talked about, they're a minute number of the cases, but we all get a benefit of CEQA. So I'm into protecting CEQA, but I would like to see more responsibility on developers, more inclusionary zoning, a transfer tax on the sale of luxury homes in California to go to funding affordable housing. We need more new money into the process. The voters have been very generous with the housing bond that was passed last year. And so some of the puzzle pieces are there, but we have to look at things, I think, in a different way. We have to look at more compact, transit-oriented housing that works for people. And we have to have it at all different levels of need.
So can I just jump in on that because I haven't had a chance to talk about it at all. So a couple of things. I'll just give you an example of, I completely agree about the importance of protecting the environment, obviously. But, I'll give you an example of a project in Redwood City that was slowed down by really a frivolous CEQA lawsuit, which was a Habitat for Humanity project that's going to bring 20 new units of affordable for-sale housing to downtown Redwood City within our precise plan. The Habitat for Humanity project got sued by somebody using CEQA as a tool to slow it down. It slowed it down by a year. It's subsequently increased the costs, and it's kept people out of affordable homes for an extra year. So some reforms around the length of time that the suit can happen, re-litigating things that have already been litigated. Those are some reforms that I think would make sense for CEQA, that would help us move quickly, but also still stay true to the original intent and purpose of it. I wanted to say one thing on SB 5. I think, of course I want to see redevelopment reinstated. Redwood City was able to use a lot of its redevelopment money to build housing. However, the way it's structured, I won't go into all the technicalities, but I am worried about the impact on schools because some of that money may be redirected from schools. So just a concern to consider.
I just wanted to add on, if I could, to something that Shelly said in terms of CEQA. The reason that we all know the story of the Habitat for Humanity in Redwood City or the person who sued about the scalding coffee at McDonald's is because those are the real outliers in the system. And I will never do anything that blocks the average person having access to our court system. That's a fundamental piece of our democracy for any reason.
Right. So
Yeah,
you can't talk about affordable housing without talking about transportation. The two are inextricably linked, of course. So on transportation, the state has passed SB1. Regionally, we've raised tolls on our Regional Measure 3. Locally here in San Mateo County, and Santa Clara has a history of passing local revenue measures to support transportation. There's a new discussion around a mega measure, an additional sales tax, 9-county Bay Area. I'm a little concerned about potential voter fatigue there, but what can we do next in a big, a scalable way to address transportation mobility? I mean, clearly there's that linkage to housing and transit-oriented housing, as has been referenced by most of you. But what do we do in a big way to move people in the Bay Area?
So we need better, more frequent trains that are not only in the transit area, but we need to address the issue of that last mile. And I think more people would be able to use those trains, those better trains, if they could figure out how they could get home from that. That would be a very simple solution to start out with where we are today.
Well, okay, so how would you solve that last mile problem?
We need to get some sort of van or some sort of transportation locally, local incentives. In Millbrae, there should be no reason why we didn't have somebody that could come in. We have hotels around us that could take people around and get them to their home. That's where they need to go. That's why people aren't using the trains.
Well, I think that's part of it, but also frequency. I mean, I think when you think of yourselves as bedroom communities, you put up with one train an hour, but we're a series of small cities now, and we need to insist on city-like transit. So that's trains that come 4 times an hour. I'm intrigued by the transform idea of express lanes around the bay with express buses, creating kind of a poor man's subway system above ground. I think there are a lot of important things we need to do. Another bridge across the bay, Mark. We need to be able to expand our housing reach and yet keep commutes sensible for everybody. And those are big investments, and we just have to bite the bullet and make them. I don't think we have a choice.
So I think Sally brought up an important point earlier. The number of transit agencies we have in the Bay Area is significant.
Well, so how would merging them solve that problem?
Well, so if they could talk to each other, if they coordinated schedules better, I don't know that I'm not suggesting they all need to be merged, but I do think, in New York we see the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which oversees a whole variety of different transit systems, from their subways to suburban commuter rail. If we could think about something like that so that things were better coordinated, so that fares were better coordinated. And then I want to just say quickly on the frequency of services for those of us in San Mateo County, well, actually Santa Clara County as well. Caltrain is looking at its business plan, and it is looking at frequency of service as part of electrification. And I just want to encourage everybody to weigh in on their thoughts on the business plan. There's a short time left to do that, but it is important for those of us who are concerned about the ability of people to get around to weigh in on the level of service that Caltrain provides up to 2040 is what they're looking at for their business plan.
I need to interject here, just for the sake of the permanent record. I worked for Caltrain for several years and in fact launched the business plan. Merging the 29 agencies, one of the issues there is that you would expect the employees to all be under the same work rules.
Right.
2 of the agencies that you're talking about are among the highest paying, most expensive in the country. If I'm working at Samtrans, I want to join the BART pay level. I don't want BART to join my pay level. How do you make this work? And why would it work? What difference would it make?
Yeah, I think that there are some of the agencies that could be consolidated, and some of it is just working together. If someone is coming from Mountain View and they want to come to San Carlos on El Camino on a fast bus, they're getting off at Palo Alto and switching buses to come. And so there are some things that could be done through collaboration. I absolutely think that Caltrain has to be strengthened. If you go down to Gilroy, there are incredible amounts of new housing down there. They have a beautiful up-and-coming downtown, and you cannot take Caltrain there outside of rush hour commute times. There just is not a train to get there or to get back. And so I think that we have to work on strengthening Caltrain, the ridership is down, and to me that speaks to the usability of the system and the frequency of the system. And we have those buses that Annie was talking about. We've got a community shuttle in many of our cities. We've got
Community.org provides shuttles in a variety of cities.
Yeah, there's a lot of that happening, and there's a lot of the electric bikes happening and other kinds of creativity happening. And I really encourage people to get involved in the Caltrain 2040 plan and to take a look at it and see how we can really strengthen that as one of the workhorses of our system. I do think that we need to have more free transit in the Bay Area and stop the bureaucratic shuffle of how do we charge kids a school pass, all these kinds of things, and just open up the transit, because if it's usable and it's free, people will get on it.
Okay, we're going to have to take another break. We're talking to the 5 Democrats running in the 13th Senate District. Stay with us. We'll be right back. A friend of mine.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen, and over here we have the 5 Democrats running for the 13th State Senate District over here. That was a little dismissive. That's not what I had in mind.
That's fine.
We want to wrap up the conversation about transportation. As we went off the air, Michael, you said something in support of the merger.
Well, I mean, just quickly, I mean, the reason to merge these agencies is because when you have 29 agencies, they're all sitting arguing for their own pet projects, and we don't have unlimited funds, so we should coordinate the 29, bring them together, and fund the most important projects. We can all think of different transit investments that were not the highest and best use of public money.
And Josh, we haven't heard from you. You must have something to say.
I would say that I do believe we should be more ambitious. We've done some good work, Measure W here in San Mateo County, Measure B in Santa Clara County. But so many of our residents, they travel to other cities, they travel around the world. They say, why can't we have a system like that? That's going to take the investment. That's why I do support the Faster Bay Area initiative. I think we need something of that scale. That's the only way we're going to get things like Dumbarton Rail, right? There's more housing in the east, more jobs here. How do we make that easier? Dumbarton Rail is a way to do that. We need to get all the grade separations funded. We have 42 grade separations for Caltrain. That's the only way we're going to get from 65,000 riders at Caltrain to the vision, in the moderate growth scenario of 150,000, or they actually have plans to get to 250,000. That'd be like adding 3 additional lanes on 101. So I do believe that voters, if we put it to that and show their money's going to be used responsibly, they will support that, and I do.
But I want to say on the Dumbarton Rail project, one of the things that's been interesting as it moves forward is the private-public partnership that's starting to move the planning forward. And I think that's a really significant effort in terms of launching it. I mean, ultimately, it's going to take a mix of private and public dollars to do something like Dumbarton Rail. And it's going to transform the Caltrain line, to your point. It's going to transform the number of riders that get on. The connectivity with Caltrain is going to be critically important, as well as the stations. And those grade SEPs cost $11 billion. If you put a price tag on those 42 at-grade crossings, that money has to come from somewhere as well. So there's a significant amount of investment that has to happen to really transform our public transportation.
And this would be $100 billion. That's what's contemplated here. Right?
And just to the Faster Bay Area proposal that's moving forward, we also have to look at what is the business community's responsibility in terms of creating all of the intensity and use of the Bay Area. And right now, that's proposed to be a sales tax.
Right.
So sales taxes hit people of modest means first. And these are the people that are barely holding on to their housing, et cetera. So as that process goes forward, we have to look at business taxes for the entire Bay Area. And having the business community, we have many geese laying many golden eggs, and they can participate too, and not just have it be a sales tax.
I agree. Everything doesn't have to be a sales tax. I agree.
That'll definitely be part of the conversation. It's an evolving conversation on that particular measure and the timing with the ballot. So speaking of timing and money, one of you will be the next state senator, and in your first term, you will likely be dealing with, along with your legislative colleagues, a recession. We haven't.
Oh, thanks.
We haven't done away with the business cycle.
Doomsday.
Haven't done away with the business cycle. And Jerry Brown has been warning about this for years. If you talk to Gavin off camera, he would acknowledge that there's no way we get through his first term without dealing with some kind of a slowdown, some kind of an economic downturn. What programs would you focus on in terms of protection? We've got this rainy day fund, but if it's a severe downturn, that can go away very quickly, and you're going to be dealing with an issue around what do we protect in terms of cuts that we make. Where are your values in terms of that budget? The budget is a values document. What would you protect should we have to deal with an economic downturn?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm uniquely qualified in talking about what to do at the state level in an economic downturn, because I was there when we had a $29.5 billion shortfall. So I know what it's like to
You
take
weren't
a real...
personally responsible.
No, it came in my first day, welcome here, there's a $29.5 billion shortfall. But so I know what it's like to have to take a meat axe to programs up there and how hard that is. When I got out of the state assembly, one of the things that I worked for the most was to get a simple majority budget, because previous to that, with a 2/3 budget vote, we had all kinds of budget games going on, all kinds of crazy projects coming out of everywhere. Now we have the reserves, we have more stability in terms of things, but we have to look at some sources of income for our state that are not just dependent on personal income taxes.
And I want to get to that in a second, but the question Kevin was asking is, if there's a program you'd protect against cuts, what would it be?
The number one that we must protect is education. The co-number one or the number two are services for people with disabilities. And those were on the cutting block previously. And we have to do more to protect those. Where we have to make cuts is our over-bloated prison system. We are still, as a state, addicted to incarceration of way too many people at way too much cost for way too little effect. And we've got to take that money and put it into productive things like education.
Okay.
Kevin, can I answer that question a little bit with regard to the rainy day fund? And I am very grateful that somebody was proactive instead of reactive. And I think that would be the way that I would handle the question that you gave to us with regards to the budget. We need to be proactive. There's a lot of taxes that go unpaid. And if we had an opportunity to collect on things that are not paid for and loopholes of people that are taking advantage of taxes due, that's where I would react now. And so we could be proactive rather than react. You know, with the rainy day, with the slush fund that we do have there, all of our projects can remain as long as we make a better budget, not anything that is wasteful or anything that needs to be increased with taxes. It's not time to raise taxes. We're flourishing. Let's enjoy the moments for a moment, and let's be proactive on how we can collect what hasn't been collected, and take and put our brains together to make a better budget.
So I'm not sure that they'd agree with calling it a slush fund, but that aside.
Well, that was a bad word. I'm sorry.
Fine. But what it sounds like is you're not prepared to say that any part of the budget would be untouchable as far as you're concerned. That's the question Kevin was asking. And you're saying you don't think we need to cut the budget.
Not today. No, okay. I think that what I want to do is be proactive on what we can to collect things that have not been collected that are owed to us.
Right. But the hypothetical that Kevin poses is absolutely going to be a reality at some point. And so I honor Sally's leadership in the House back in the day. I was elected in 2009. It was the same thing. When I got elected to Burlingame, we were talking about outsourcing our police department, closing a branch library because of the Great Recession. So you do need to think about this. I do appreciate the rainy day fund. I share Sally's values. I would protect education. I would really zero in on 0 to 5. I'm increasingly concerned about helping our kids start kindergarten, or what I call conception to kindergarten, making sure those services are robustly protected and invested in. I think if we can get our kids up to the same level as everyone else in kindergarten, they'll have much better outcomes in the long run, actually save money in the long run. So I think those are the areas that you have to protect. Thank you.
Josh.
Well, protect is the right word, because in a recession, there's certain things that are still going to happen. We're still going to pay for our health care, right? Our $105 billion for Medi-Cal. We're still going to pay for that prison spending.
Not necessarily.
Well, there's sort of that is protected. The prison spending, that's going to happen. Those wages are owed. So what doesn't get protected? It's things like higher education, right? The reason I ran the first time, the prison budget used to be 1/3 of the UC budget. Then it became bigger than UC, CSU, community college budget combined. Those funding, higher education funding and social services funding, is not protected in a downturn. Those are the things that get squeezed. So that's why I think, and you've done some great structural reform work, Kevin, I'd like to work with you on that. We need to not have those ebbs and flows, right? Not be so income tax dependent at our top line. And then also look at what are some other sources of revenue so we can have a more stable source of funding.
Yeah, so I was elected to school board in Redwood City in 2005. So within 2 years, we were making.
Well, you've all got a tale of woe, don't you?
I know. Well, I mean, look, you serve in public life, and you're eventually. I think to Kevin's point, you're eventually going to serve. If you serve in a number of years, you're going to serve during a recession, right? And so in Redwood City School District, we had to cut 20% of our budget. So we did have to make that exact decision. And I love that you said that a budget is a statement of values. You know, that's what Delane Easton always says. Delane says a budget is a vision of your values. And so we absolutely have to protect public education. In a way, it's protected through the Prop 98 guarantee. However, as the budget goes up and down, the guarantee within Prop 98 changes, right? And so thinking about how do we address that structurally, California goes really boom and bust because, as my colleagues have mentioned, we rely on capital gains tax and personal income tax as the majority of our budget. And so looking at structural reforms like closing the corporate property tax loophole, as the Schools and Communities First initiative does, helps protect us from going so far down so quickly as soon as we enter into a recession, and puts money back into schools, back into communities where we really need it. All these issues we've been talking about are the issues that our property taxes could help fund.
Yeah. We're going to take another break. It's a little early for Cody back in the booth there, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen. And over here we have the 5 Democrats running in the 13th State Senate District to replace the venerable Jerry Hill. We were talking about, what were we talking about? I wanted to shift a little bit to talk about property taxes. We've had several references to, can we make the pie bigger? Is there some other way we can generate more income? There's going to be on the ballot, when at least one of you is going to be on the ballot, a proposal to quote-unquote reform Prop 13 to shift more of the burden for property taxes back to commercial properties that has shifted away dramatically from commercial properties since Prop 13. Are you yes or no on this measure? Do you think we should approve that?
Yeah,
Sally.
Absolutely. We've got to have reform of the commercial side of Prop 13. The homeowner protections must be in place forever, but we have to have reform of an unfair giveaway to very large corporations and very large landholders in California. I also think that we have to look at a wealth tax on the unearned income of California's billionaires, of which there are many, and ask them to do a little bit more to help ameliorate childhood poverty in our state. It's not possible to just put that off on the schools and have them do an effective job on it. And that goes to what we talked about before, a sustainable budget, sustainable income for our state to do the things that we need to do.
Anyone else want to talk
I would disagree slightly on that subject. While I support any loopholes that exists.
You support closing them?
I would support closing any loophole that exists with Prop 13 or the split roll. While I understand that it'll bring massive taxes to the budget, I think that we were all going to have to pay for that in the future. And I fear that very, 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 very strongly. There's taxes that are unclaimed, that are owed. We need to go take care of collecting that. We're looking at small businesses that every 3 years will have their property taxes for where they hold this business re-looked at and reanalyzed to increase.
Actually, I want to jump in on that because
to increase their taxes, and if that's hitting the small business people and the middle class.
Okay.
I actually want to jump in on that, Annie, because the way that the Schools and Communities First initiative is structured is it does exempt small businesses and protects them as well as the homeowners. So it's really only on the large corporations. And that was very intentional, recognizing that we want our small businesses.
I would agree
to
that the
thrive.
loopholes are with the bigger businesses, but we're talking commercial properties.
So-
and what you defined as small and what somebody defines as their own small business that employs employees that make a living out of the building that they go to work with every day, I would not support this.
So, I mean, so I have 30 years in public service, and I have been listening to claims that waste, fraud, and mismanagement can help pay for the budget holes, and there no doubt is, and we should no doubt avoid it. They are never anywhere near the scale that you need. So I just want to be clear, while I believe we're a fully taxed state, I do support the reform to Prop 13. I remember the Prop 13 debate. I was a kid here in Santa Clara County, and I think we voted to make sure Granny wouldn't lose her home. I don't think we were voting to make sure Granny wouldn't lose her strip mall.
And two-thirds, to your point, 2/3 of the revenue before Prop 13 came from commercial properties,
Right.
and only 1/3 residential. Now it's reversed. 2/3 residential, 1/3 commercial. So that, I think, speaks to the need for reform.
Well, I'm all for eliminating the Department of Waste and Fraud myself.
Good.
Congratulations.
Kevin.
Climate crisis gets a lot of attention in Sacramento, particularly under a previous governor. This governor as well has talked about the need for California to lead really globally on this issue. What more can be done to draw attention to this crisis? And are those efforts primarily local, or what can be done at the state capitol specifically on addressing greenhouse gas reduction, eliminations, and dealing with this issue? Let's start with Josh, and we'll mix it up.
Josh, have a shot.
I think this is the challenge of our generation. And Greta Thunberg, I think she woke us all up. She said we need to be wide awake. This is the time to be wide awake and the time for action. I've worked on this issue most of my adult life, starting out advising EPA in DC, worked for a congresswoman on the Energy and Commerce Committee, started a fund to support innovative clean energy companies and clean energy technology. We need a multi-point plan. So I have a 6-point plan, includes everything from government operations. Let's have our government operations be carbon neutral by 2030. Let's plug our transportation sector into our grid. We've done a good job of electrifying our grid. Now let's plug our transportation sector in. Clean air, these 2-stroke motors for leaf blowers and lawnmowers, it's predicted they're going to have more particulate pollution by 2022 than all the cars on the road. They're highly pollutive. We can phase those out, have electrical. Support for clean energy research, which we have much of in this in this state. Ag tech, where we can actually do farming in a way that sequesters carbon. So those are some of the elements, but we need it all hands on deck. And the cities can lead, as Menlo Park has done recently on electric buildings.
Me.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I agree on all of those points, and I think some of you may have seen the governor just announce a partnership with Bloomberg Philanthropies to launch satellites to assess the carbon reduction efforts in California. So those kinds of public-private partnerships are going to be a critical piece of this puzzle. In addition, building the infrastructure that we need to move our transportation to electric transportation. We just don't have the infrastructure. We have a lot of gas stations. We don't have a lot of electric vehicle charging stations. Redwood City, this past Monday night, we were just discussing moving our buildings to all electric buildings, and then what does that mean in terms of what our specific requirements are going to be. So cities do have a role in this. The state has a role as well. I think Assemblymember Gloria introduced a climate crisis resolution in California for this year, which didn't pass, but would have moved the state faster moving us from 2040 to 2030 and requiring us to address carbon emissions at a much faster pace.
We have to do that. So I was proud to testify in front of the county, San Mateo County Board. They passed a climate emergency resolution. And one of the other testifiers put it well. He said, yes, California is leading in a race. The problem is everyone else in the race is a really slow runner. We have to move much more quickly. We're the richest, greenest government in the world, and we have to move much more quickly to zero carbon energy, or otherwise our kids and our grandkids, it's game over. It's incumbent on us getting to zero carbon energy.
So what's also so really important for our district is with the sea level rise and with climate change taking the cars off the roads, we have to address that's the major cause of sea level rise, and we need to restore our wetlands and build borders where walls need to be built for that. So I think that our district especially is very vulnerable for that. And with everything that has been said, good work is going in that direction, and I would support every one of these causes.
Yeah, I don't exactly agree with Mike that all the important things have been done at the state level, because as a state we're still, okay, sorry about misquoting you, but at the state level, we're still, as a state, about 70% dependent on natural gas.
Yeah.
And natural gas produces greenhouse gases that add to our climate crisis. So we have to pursue rapid electrification of everything, the transit, all housing, all machinery, everything that we possibly can.
Right.
And strengthen our support for the small renewables. We have to extend community choice aggregation that's worked really well in the Bay Area into the Central Valley and some of the other parts of our state where the air quality is really a challenge. And we have to have an oil severance tax and ban fracking permanently and forever.
We've got 2 minutes left. We want to ask you, Kevin has a question for each of you. You've got about 30 seconds to answer.
This is a lightning round and it bookends the first question, why are you running? But what differentiates you from these other Democrats running for office? And specifically, what role do you see yourself playing at the state capitol? What will you focus on?
We'll start with Shelly.
So that's an easy question for me. My deep education policy experience in advocacy, as well as my experience in health and public health. So sometimes when you talk about that, you talk about what committees do you want to serve in. You don't ever want to jinx it by, sort of envisioning yourself someplace, but the two committees I would want to serve on initially would be education and health, working on increasing access to high quality health care for everyone and strengthening and fighting for our public education system.
Josh.
Thank you both for having us. I said Jerry Hill's being termed out, big shoes to fill. One issue we did not discuss is PG&E and holding them accountable, which I will do. I'd like to be the progressive leader on climate change in the state Senate. That's very much part of my background, and that's what I'd like to do. Again, I think there's no bad choices up here, but that's one I want to
Sally, very quickly.
Yeah, I have a very strong track record at the state level of addressing the climate crisis, of doing good environmental work. I authored the legislation to create the Bay Restoration Authority to prevent some of the impacts of climate change in the future. And I want to work really hard on income inequality in our state, because I think that's going to determine our future in a big way.
Annie, very quickly.
So I want to be that no-nonsense moderate candidate that is going to go to Sacramento and make common sense decisions. I'd like to take my professional everyday job to how I create housing and find affordable housing for everybody, and that's where I would like to see myself in a committee in Sacramento.
Mike Brownrigg.
Thanks. I focus on the affordability crisis for our district and the climate crisis for our state. I'm a former diplomat. I'm used to bringing people together. I like what Bobby Kennedy said. I don't look left. I don't look right. I look forward. That's what I would do.
Thank you all. Thank you all for appearing on this show. Thank you all for running for office.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching us. I'm Mark Simon.
And I'm Kevin Mullen.
This has been a special edition of The Game. Thanks for being with us, and join us next time.